itself. Please join us.
Saturday mornings at 7 on KSJE Farmington.
Hello, I'm Antonia Gonzalez with National Native News. Tune in to our headline news service for stories about indigenous communities across the country and around the world. Hear about top concerns facing Native nations. Tribal history, language, and culture is also part of Indigenous life. Check out our headline news service to learn more. Tune in here for National Native News.
Weekdays at 5:55 on KSJE Farmington. This program is supported by San Juan Health Partners Urology, providing a wide range of personalized services for the whole family, including children. Our caring professionals are dedicated to helping meet your urology health needs with skill, experience, and service you need. For a complete listing of our services and to learn more, visit sanjuanhealthpartners.com or call 505-609-6300. San Juan Health Partners Urology, a division of San Juan Regional Medical Center. Eleven minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Thursday morning, Valentine's Day, February 14th. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Michlin. Thank you for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM, the information and cultural beacon of the Four Quarters, broadcasting from our visual radio studios here at San Juan College. Special good morning to our viewers who are watching us live this morning on our visual radio program here on our KSJE Facebook page or YouTube channel. Coming up in just a moment, everybody, we'll be talking economic development with my guest, Warren Unzicker. He, of course, is the new Economic Development Director for the city of Farmington. He'll be joining us in just a second here on KSJE. Later on this morning, around 8:55, we will check in with Jason Calcote from Citizens Trust and Investment Corporation. He's been keeping track of some of the economic news of the past week. He'll share that with us. We'll find out how the markets are doing, prices for oil and natural gas, all coming up this morning later on this hour at 8:55 here on KSJE. And again, roving with the arts after the news at 9:06. Mick Hess will take us roving with the arts today. Mick is playing more Bach cantatas for us, so that is coming up this morning as well. And let me introduce my guest who is here with us this morning, Warren Unzicker, as I mentioned, the new Economic Development Director with the City of Farmington. Good morning.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here again.
Once again, welcome back. It's good to see you, and thank you for being here. And I do want to point out a little kudos to you because you were honored just this week, as a matter of fact, by the Farmington City Council, I believe, for an accomplishment. You were named one of the 40 under 40 economic development people.
Yes, thank you. Is that
in the state or national?
No, this is national.
National, that's what I thought.
So, this was a great honor. I'm very pleased to be representing the city of Farmington.
So. Very good. We've shown a picture of you with City Manager Rob Mays getting a little recognition there at a city council meeting. So, again, congratulations. And we hope that means good things are coming.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And of course, that's why you're here to talk with me a little bit about some of the things that have been going on. Legislature is meeting. There are a few bills that you're watching.
Just a few, yeah.
Just a few. What are some of the ones that the rest of us should be watching?
Sure, absolutely. So we've got a lot of moving parts this legislative session.
It's a 60-day session, so that usually means lots of bills are introduced and lots of potential for passage.
If you got one in your hip pocket, you need to submit it today. Today's the deadline. Okay. So that's the. But no, we've got numerous bills that we, both our lobbyists and contacts that we work with, are watching for us. Some good, some not so great. Some that fit perfectly with what we're trying to accomplish up here. One of those is the outdoor recreation piece that the governor is trying to put together, kind of a quasi-department, a director at least, that would be heading up outdoor recreation for the state as a whole, which is fortuitous timing for us because we were the first in the state to establish a director of outdoor recreation in Corey Styron.
Farmington has, that's right.
Right.
So they're copying us, is what you're telling me.
Something like that. Well, we won't say that.
The sincerest form of flattery, they say, imitation.
Form of flattery, but no,
this would be a state-level person,
yes,
which could be helpful for cities like Farmington.
So, yeah. So this is House Bill 462. Oh, no, Senate Bill 462. My apologies. And so this would allow a individual that would be under one of the departments of the cabinet secretaries that would establish basically a committee that would start working on coming up with ways to market and attract outdoor recreation industry to this state. So going to be very interesting to see how that pans out and what that looks like, how we can be involved at the table.
Right.
The hope is that we are a part of that committee in some way, shape, or form.
One would think, right? One would think.
And so that's the goal and hope. We'll just have to make sure that we know kind of what the process is if it does get passed.
Okay.
But, it has a lot of support across the aisle, and so hopefully that'll help our endeavors up here as we push for outdoor recreation.
One would think. And this is not just another push for tourism-related outdoor recreation. This is more of the business side.
Correct, yeah. And this is something that we have been pursuing for a while now, and that we've had some success in terms of getting some outfitters established here. But really we want to get more of the industry-based level.
Manufacturing or testing, things like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's something I think that's on the horizon. The hope is that they'll be there in force at the Outdoor Recreation Retailers Show that we go to each year.
The state.
The state, yeah, correct. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
To help kind of support our efforts. So hopefully we can work in tandem with the state and get some bigger splash at that show. So.
And if you get some nibbles, I suppose, or maybe some of these folks that maybe want to consider relocating or moving here, could this then new position perhaps sweeten the pot a little bit, maybe with some state incentives or route things around, or at least try to make your offer better than the one from Colorado or Utah, or nothing against those other states, but they're not New Mexico.
Right, exactly. And so it'll depend on if they are a manufacturer. Then we can use LEDA and things like that will be able to kind of, like say, sweeten the pot and help us get that in front of them and say, hey, we can offer you this if you're creating this many jobs and investing this much in the community. We can help you out. We can get you JTIP. We can get all these different incentive packages.
These are different economic
incentive programs.
So
that
the state already has,
incentive,
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so the state's likewise trying to push to increase the amount they have in the LEDA closing fund. I believe they're looking for like $50 million this year. And so that will help too, as we have more of these projects come along, that the state has more in their coffers to play with, so to speak, in terms of attracting business to the state. So
that sounds like a positive.
That is positive.
Okay.
Yes.
And you mentioned bipartisan support, which is another positive thing we don't always hear about from the Roundhouse. And
not as such.
And I would imagine the governor's quite positive towards this as well. So if the bill does make it to her desk, there are pretty good chances she's going to sign that.
Yeah, no, I think she's fully in support of this, and it's going to be appointed by her. So she's
makes sense. Yeah. She would probably like that bill. Yeah. So that sounds like a done deal. Although I don't want to jinx it.
Well, yeah, no, we submitted a few minor amendments just out of making sure that it does include rural communities. And
so it's not just the Rio Grande corridor, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So the hope is that some of the little amendments we did at least raise awareness to them that we want to be at the table, if nothing else.
Sure. Good.
That's good things.
So that we'll watch for that one. And what other bills are you watching? Not all as positive as this one, I'm afraid.
Sure. Yeah. No. Of course, the coal plant is ever present and looming at the legislature and here that we are looking and watching.
This is legislation about the San Juan Generating Station and P&M's plan to divest itself of that station and start the shutdown or abandonment process, I think is the term that is used in the industry, correct?
Correct. So we are past the integrated resource plan process. That was what we were previously kind of, I wouldn't say fighting, but we're monitoring and being at the table and submitting evidence, basically saying that we don't agree with the assumptions in that document. That has been accepted by the Public Regulations Commission. However, it has now been put into the abandonment process, and the PRC is pushing forward with trying to get answers on that from P&M in conjunction with the legislature. And there's a little bit of tension between the PRC and the legislature right now in terms of who really gets to decide what.
Right. There's some concerns about when the economic development impacts should be discussed, I thought. One was during this resource plan question, the other one in the PRC saying, no, we can talk about it maybe now that the abandonment process has started.
Absolutely. So, and likewise, there's concerns over whether or not the legislation that would be passed is viable during an open hearing, essentially,
which is going on now
with the PRC. Exactly. So there's a lot of tumultuous activity in that regard.
Right.
But there has been a bill that's been dropped, Senate Bill 489, that we are taking a very hard look at, because there are some, wouldn't call them necessarily poison pill, but there's some items in there that we are not comfortable with in their current form. And so we are kind of wait and see until we've had a chance to talk with the authors and the powers that be as to how we do or do not support that bill. And so that's going to be an ongoing process right up until probably the very end of the session as we put this forward.
Right.
And there's some other periphery bills that are trying to support the plant. I know that Senate Bill 347 is trying to reduce taxes on coal, so that would help with basically making the plant more viable if we were to attract a merchant buyer.
Someone else other than P&M, once they abandon it, it wouldn't necessarily be quote-unquote abandoned, I suppose. Another operator could move in.
Correct, yeah.
And if the taxes are less, they could make it maybe it's more economically feasible to run a coal plant.
Right, exactly.
All right.
And so that would reduce the cost on the fuel, which would reduce the cost of the power and cascade through the process there.
Let me ask you a bit about
Please.
this other bill
Yeah.
that is very complicated. This is it Transition and Energy Bill?
So yeah,
what's
that's
the name of it?
Senate Bill 489.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the Energy Transition Act.
Thank you. So the idea being that this is trying to maybe control a little bit of how P&M abandons this plant, how much their ratepayers are left on the hook for some of those costs of maybe redeveloping that plant. And then the other side of that, too, I think, if I recall it correctly, it's a big bill.
It is. It's about 80 and 90 pages.
Right, and I didn't read all of it, so I will admit that right off the bat. But there's a economic development component to this bill, I think,
Correct,
too, that
yeah.
would provide several millions of dollars
But to the state, not to us.
to the state, which with the intent that it would come maybe to us.
Maybe.
But that's an issue.
Yeah, and so that's strings attached to what we could potentially utilize those funds.
The idea being to retrain some of these displaced workers.
Well, some of it for that. So what would probably end up happening is you'd have monies go to either Economic Development Department,
Right.
or to LEDA, or you'd have monies go to workforce the workforce state
Workforce
agency.
Solutions,
yeah, workforce
right.
solutions, and so that's great and all, but that is by no means a guarantee of us receiving the full force and power and flexibility to implement those activities.
Gotcha.
Up
Okay.
here. And so full determination on that, but that just doesn't have the same level of je ne sais quoi that we would like to see for funds that would help us diversify up here.
And the language is important
Right.
because it doesn't specifically point out or dictate San Juan County. It could be used somewhere else, even though the intent maybe is that it won't. But
Right.
I think if politics
Intention
are to
and
be
acts,
studied,
yeah, exactly.
people would feel more comfortable maybe if it really spelled out where that money was going to
Right.
go. The other issue I think was part of this is replacement power,
Right.
because as the grid loses the power generated by the San Juan generating station, the question is, well, where do you get the replacement power?
Right.
Because we're certainly still using electricity, and the idea, I think, was that they would build or invest some type of maybe natural gas plant
Right.
or other type of plant in San Juan County. It had to
Right.
be built here to help with the tax base.
Correct.
And
And
that's
that-
part of this bill too, right?
Yes, and that would help with a good portion of the tax base.
Because that's another concern people have, is once that plant closes and if it doesn't reopen under a new operator, it may go off the tax rolls, and that's a big hit for
Oh, yeah.
Central Consolidated School District, San Juan College, and some other entities, the state certainly,
Absolutely.
and the county.
Absolutely. And so that is something that we have to be very cognizant of, is making sure that there isn't any loopholes there to allow for it to say, well, if it's economical, or if it works out engineering wise, or
Right, all the ifs.
those little bitty things that get slid into bills that make them a little more nebulous. So the hope is that is firm, and that it really does mean that they're going to locate all of that replacement power, at least most of it, up here to replace that tax base, and that it is located within CCSD and San Juan County tax roles, because that's
Right.
really where it's going to be hit the hardest.
Sure. And so that's part of this bill too, which is why it's just so huge.
It's huge, it's complex, and it's got a lot of moving parts that we have to be very cognizant of as we move forward. So,
Right. But the things that we're sure about is the P&M is going to close that. They're going to abandon that plant. They are getting out of the coal business. And that's nothing that the legislature is dealing with, or is it?
So that's a complicated question, because there is language in this bill that is concerning around a limitation on emissions that essentially renders the plant unusable for anyone, not just P&M, anyone for the future, forever and ever, amen.
Right.
So it's kind of one of those things that's a red flag extraordinaire, because that essentially precludes us from getting an operator or merchant plant. So we're very much concerned with that potential, where we have to look very closely and have conversations with the powers that be that's a no-go item. And so there's a lot of concern on that front in terms of making sure that we amend that or find ways to work around that.
Right. And certainly the governor, though, has been very outspoken about her wants to move New Mexico to more renewable sources of energy.
Sure.
A big goal, I think, was, I don't know, it was 50%, 40% in the next maybe 20 years or so. Is that the number I saw?
2030 was supposed to be 50%, and then 2050 or somewhere in that realm was supposed to be 80% or something like that.
So that has got a lot of folks talking about if that's feasible or not feasible, or where we are.
Right. The biggest concern for us is the cost to ratepayers, because we've seen it in California and other states that if you do it too quickly, it raises your rates exponentially for ratepayers, sometimes 25-50% to rate base. And so that's something that we want to make sure that there's actually a website out there that's like Affordable Energy Coalition, but essentially it's making sure that citizens are being taken care of in this entire process and not being left to fit the bill for all these renewables without some level of recourse in that regard. I think that we do have a lot of potential in renewables because of our massive amounts of sunshine and wind in the west or eastern parts of the state, and we have hydropower here. There is definitely potential, and something that we would definitely consider if we had developers coming to us, and if we can find interested parties, would make that happen. But it's a matter of, one, finding customers for the power, and two, making sure that it's an affordable rate. And that's where it really comes down to how much are these solar fields costing, and what economies of scale do you need to make them viable.
Right. And I can see some in the state saying, well, this is what our plan is if we abandon the San Juan generating station, you tear that plant down and you reclaim that land, and then you put a solar field in that area, you have access to the transmission lines, and that would replace some of that power. Certainly the critics of renewable energy is, what do you do when the sun's not out, or what do you do when you need power in the middle of the night and your solar fields are generating Zippo?
Yeah, and that's where natural gas plants and reciprocating engines come in, because they backstop that. And likewise coal. It's those base load energy sources that are 24/7 or easily ramped up or ramped down depending on demand.
Right, a natural gas plant easier than a coal plant to ramp up.
Yeah, absolutely. They have a far less of a ramp time to get up to speed and heat. So no, that's again, it's not as simple and cut and dry as like, just replace whatever you took out from P&M with renewables.
Right.
It's not a one-to-one equation.
Sure.
Let's put it that way.
Right. Although you could replace it with a 1-to-1 kilowatt equation with solar, natural gas, or something, but it's not a 1-to-1 jobs replacement.
Well, definitely not that. But even with the energy replacement, if you were to take out the entirety of P&M's production there at the coal plant right now, replace it with just solar, you would have to then go find backstop to stabilize the grid from a baseload perspective.
Correct. I understand.
And so that's where it becomes a little more complicated, and that's why they're considering those natural gas plants for up here as well as a part of this deal. But from a jobs perspective, you're right. Both natural gas and solar both only generate 30 to 50 jobs tops for long-term operations. Now, I know everybody's like, well, solar produces thousands of jobs. Well, those are temporary construction jobs. Same with any other power plant that's being built.
Right.
Right now, coal is on the decline exponentially because none are being built. So it's very easy to say, oh, well, this fuel source is producing this many more jobs. Well, yeah, because it's under construction.
Right. What about the long-term permanent jobs?
The long-term permanent jobs is
apples to apples comparison.
Exactly. And so that's where it gets muddied sometimes in rhetoric out in the general public of like,
what? I'm shocked. I'm shocked there would be muddied rhetoric, Mr. Unzicker, in the public discourse of some of these important topics. But I hear what you're saying.
And again, like I said, it's pretty much any other energy source that's currently in construction right now is producing a lot more jobs, but they're temporary jobs.
Right.
And so that's where where our major concerns are, and it is beneficial for that short term for sure. I mean, it brings in a significant amount of short-term labor, it brings in hotel night stays, it brings in contractors, various different other things, but it's not long-term wages, and it's not necessarily going to replace the jobs of what we would potentially lose with San Juan generating stations. So.
Right. And again, as looking at long-term economic development, you are probably looking at things that will be providing long-term stability and jobs for this community, and not just the booms and busts that we keep seeing.
Correct.
Every time there's a new air filter going in at the plants, we see an influx of workers to install those scrubbers, and then it goes back down again, I suppose, after a few years. So.
And that just happened with APS in conclusion of their major retrofit of their plant.
Right.
They had 800-plus contractors out there, and those are now dissipating.
Packing up and going to the next job.
Exactly. So that again, isn't a long-term sustainable thing, but it still is a great shot in the arm temporarily, which is good. So anyway, that we are very closely monitoring that.
This bill, yes.
This bill, and we'll be continuing to. But we've got some other things in the hopper as well to help with our efforts. We have several bills right now that are related to alcohol sales.
Okay.
And this is more for the downtown renovation and retrofit. Right now, it is so cumbersome to buy a liquor license and have a liquor licensing capability for full liquored spirits that.
And this is a uniquely New Mexican thing that we're talking
There's
about.
There's a few other states, but it is pretty unique.
Not too many.
Not too many, no.
Okay.
Coming from Oklahoma, I can't throw too many stones. We have some goofy liquor laws out there, too. But you can at least get your 3-point beer on the weekends at the convenience stores. But these liquor licenses make it very difficult for mom and pop and entrepreneur businesses to have add that revenue stream to their restaurant or their establishment.
Right.
And that can be a make or break piece of the puzzle with food service.
They're almost prohibitively expensive if one ever comes available. I guess is in the first point.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very odd process in which there's only a limited amount of licenses out there, and as such, they've become a commodity that are upwards of $500,000 and $800,000 a piece
for just the license.
Just the license, and that then you have to go in and start trying to recoup that cost. And so obviously there's a lot of pushback from the people that already have those licenses that have paid their due and now have this commodity.
Right.
They don't want to see the value of that tank to $5,000 or whatever a new liquor license might be. So we're trying to get creative around ways in which it would benefit mom and pop and small business in certain areas of the state, and likewise also benefit or keep the value to a certain degree.
I see.
One of which is to only allow it within certain districts, like our MRA, that are blighted, disadvantaged, whatever you want to qualify them as.
Right. MRA is that metropolitan redevelopment area,
correct.
which is a lot of the downtown Farmington geographic area.
Correct.
I believe Aztec has one now too. Working on one.
I think they're working on a district of sorts, but yeah, the MRA has to have certain criteria from a blight perspective.
Okay.
And so that disqualifies a lot of areas around town for being just too successful.
Right.
But
well, someone who used to live downtown, maybe you're welcome for me contributing to the blight of the MRA.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, so that opportunity would allow for specialized liquor licenses or licenses given specifically to the city that we could lease within that MRA district that is specifically to that district. Other things being looked at are taking the actual licenses that already exist and grandfathering them in. So if you have a beer and wine license, grandfathering it in to allow you to carry locally distilled spirits. So New Mexico produced liquor.
Okay.
And so you couldn't carry Jack Daniels or, Crown or whatever that is, but you could carry Santa Fe Brewing or the Brewstillery over at Three Rivers and have those spirits in your facility and serve that as a part of your beer and wine license.
I see.
Okay. So yeah, getting kind of tricky and creative, trying to figure out ways. And then likewise, I think I mentioned last time, there is a nonprofit license that you can get. Now, obviously, that prohibits where you can put the revenues from the liquor, but that could go towards paying the staff that man the facility and that go toward the. In fact, I believe the Lost Parrot in Aztec is one of these. It's a nonprofit license essentially.
Okay.
And it's kind of an odd loophole, but you can, as a nonprofit, basically establish a liquor establishment. I think it was made for like Elks Lodges and Mason clubs, Freemasons and things like that. To have.
So what is it? And what does the city would like to do with this legislation? I guess is have this district, and as downtown becomes revitalized, to have additional outdoor pubs and nightclubs or things like that?
Well, just to allow for some nightlife, to allow for establishments to stay open a little bit later, that keep people downtown.
I see.
Because otherwise, you come down, you grab dinner, and then it's time to go home. And then maybe you go to another place that has liquor late or whatever it may be. Go down to Distill or somewhere like that. But this would create that walkability and that you go grab dinner here, go watch, pick up some art here, and then go grab a drink here, and it just kind of keeps people in the downtown area walking around, enjoying the new amenities that are going to be going in there longer.
Right.
And so it's just I think a strategic piece of that puzzle to keep that downtown area viable, because right now a good majority of people go to Durango when they want to have that type of experience, because we don't really have that level of walkability established here.
Right. And it's not that we don't have restaurants or bars or places to go downtown at the moment, but maybe more selection.
Right.
And if you think about places like Durango, there's certainly plenty of places to choose from, or a Santa Fe or a Central Avenue in Albuquerque. There are a lot of places within the walking distance in those districts, in those areas. Absolutely.
And by nature, then, stores usually stay open later when they know that there's clientele out later, and so it compounds upon itself rather quickly in terms of creating more revenue for the area, and likewise creating a sense of pride in the region of like, I don't need to go to Durango. I have all of this amazing, ability to enjoy my evening downtown in Farmington. So.
Right. And I guess the only reason maybe that, of course, Colorado's got different laws, but Santa Fe or Albuquerque, maybe because they've been there longer and they've had these licenses and been able to just develop them.
Right.
And that's where they are.
Yeah. And it's obviously old money and families that have owned these for ages, and
because once you get them, you usually don't get rid of them.
Right.
These liquor licenses, because they're so valuable, as we've previously talked. So you maybe hand it down, or
you lease
keep
it
in the
out.
family.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes a revenue stream, ongoing, and
Right.
so you can just keep leasing that out to a new business owner, and
the bar may come and go, but the license remains the same.
Exactly.
For many of these cases. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so that's another one. We're also continuing to look at rail as a potential viable option. We have a bill in the legislature to do a statewide impact analysis, so to show that this isn't going to just benefit San Juan County. This has potential to benefit the entire state as a whole.
And this is the spur that we've talked about, or more rail conversations?
So this would be rail coming from south, either the I-40 corridor up to San Juan County.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would benefit the entire Four Corners region in bringing us freight rail to the area. So that will help us get commodities out, help us get raw product in. And likewise, we're looking at ways in which we could potentially attract things like petrochemical processing. But in order to do that, rail is pretty imperative.
That's how you get those things in and out, those raw materials in and the finished product out.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a lot of the raw material. That's part of why we're looking at petrochemical processing, but getting the additives that need to be brought in, and then likewise getting the finished product out in bulk is going to be crucial. So
right, but it seems like that would be an important thing. And we talked about rail's expensive, but the opportunities and some of the benefits may make it a cost-effective proposal, I suppose.
Right, absolutely.
And, of course, all this conversation, all these bills, and all the things we've been talking about this morning, Mr. Unziger, are part of the state looking at a surplus. I mean, they've got extra money that everybody wants a piece of that pie.
Absolutely.
But so a lot of these things are being talked about, and they have maybe a good chance of maybe getting some some traction, I
Yeah.
suppose. The other thing before we do
please, go ahead.
go on to something else, we only have a few minutes remaining this morning,
please.
but there's talk about maybe economic development movie studio
Right, yes.
for the county, more at the county level than the city level, but is that something that you're certainly watching?
Right, yeah, no, so I think that we are exceptionally well suited for film industry up here, just from a site location place. You've got industrial site, you've got rolling rivers, you've got hills, and you've got the Bisti Badlands. I mean, you've got just about every
That's a whole other planet if you want to shoot something out there and make it look very alien.
Exactly.
That's been done before, yes.
And westerns and things like that. This is the Southwest, and that old Wild West mentality and feel to some of the landscape. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think that we do have support of trying to figure out ways to get more of that up here now that Netflix is landing out in Albuquerque and such. We want to draw them up to film some of their new...
Only 200 miles away, Netflix.
Right? Yeah. And so there's likewise bills out there to help with incentivizing them to come to rural areas as opposed to just staying in that metroplex.
That's part of that film credit, right? That would have an extra add-on if they went outside of the Santa Fe, Albuquerque
60
area.
miles out, once you get out to there, it's far more lucrative to film, which, I mean, oh darn, you have to film some of the most beautiful landscape you've ever seen, And
you don't have a jumbo jet mooring your shot every 15 minutes.
Exactly. And because we are running short on time, too, we also have retirement at the table as well. We've got a bill out there trying to get about $1 million for a statewide retirement attraction program, which is something we're also working on as a community. And so this would be not only to attract retirees, but to attract developers that would create retirement facilities for the state and for our area. Right.
Like that for assisted living or other just type of gated community type of facilities,
transitional care and gated communities. And so this would, the benefit of that is not only does it bring in incomes that don't require a job, they're bringing in
I strive for that someday.
But it also brings periphery and ancillary jobs that are going to support those people. And likewise, they're going to support retail and other industry sectors in this area in bulk. So,
retirees are a great thing for economic development, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, look at the Phoenix area. I mean, you don't have to look too far to see a bunch of retirees over there.
Yeah, so. And we're kind of the discount Arizona in the sense that the cost of living is not nearly as high. The temperature is much more mild, both cold and hot. And so, and likewise, we have some of the most beautiful places you could ever want to be and go within a couple hours radius. So anyone with one of those giant land yachts, motorhomes can just jump in, take off for a day trip, and be back for dinner if they want to.
That's true. Very true. But that's all exciting. So these are all bills that are being bandied about, and we'll see. Are we midway through the session?
Just about, like I say, they're closing acceptance of bills today.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of be off to the races till the final hour here in March. So.
Right. So I think we're about midway through, and so now the wheeling and dealing really gets interesting. And I imagine you've made some trips to Santa Fe already, and we'll be heading back.
It's going to just keep on coming. So in fact, Municipal Day is next Wednesday, so we'll be heading up there for that. But
these are some of the things that you're watching that we should be watching if we really want to see. And a lot of these things, unfortunately or fortunately, some of these negotiations happen in the very last days or hours of the session, and then things get voted on, and all of a sudden they're passed, and everyone's going around and saying, "Oh, we have that now."
Right.
Or for good or for bad.
For good or for bad.
Whatever it is. And so don't take your eye off the ball, I suppose.
Pretty much, yeah.
As they say. Well, thank you for the update, Mr. Unsicker. Always great to visit with you and hear about what is keeping you occupied and keeping you focused as you work with the city of Farmington. And we'll have you back in about a month and see where things stand.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Warren Unsicker, the Economic Development Director with the city of Farmington, my guest here on KSJE. Back with more in just a moment, everybody. The time right now is coming up on 8:42.
A little technology shared between from American Public Media.